Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. This is an important month for the makers of maple syrup and other maple products. While the heart of the traditional sugaring season is still a couple of months away, January marks the annual Vermont Maple Conference. The conference is the region's foremost educational opportunity specifically for sugar makers. It covers everything from maple marketing and regulations to sugar bush management and forest health. This year, the conference will be held in two locations on January 20th and the 27th. To find out more, I'm joined by Mark Iselhart. Mark is the UVM Extension Maple Specialist. Extension and the Vermont Maple Sugar Makers Association collaborate on the Maple Conference. It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
And so this collaboration on the Maple Conference has been going on for quite some time. Tell me a little bit about the history.
Actually, the history of Maple Conferences in Vermont date back to 1949. A predecessor of mine, Ray Foulds, who was the Extension Forester, in 1949 started a county-based education program called the Vermont Maple Schools. There are 12 of them, and they rotated. Everyone had their own conference. About 10 years ago, it was kind of contracted down to about 5, and then a few years later, we went to just the 2 conferences. But the intent is the same, to get the latest information to producers and help them with their operations.
So when and where is this year's conference?
So the 2 conferences that Extension work on specifically will be January 20th at the School for International Training in Brattleboro, and the 27th will be at Lamoille Union High School in Hyde Park.
And so, in addition to the conference, there's also an educational event for sugar makers on January 13th in Addison County.
Correct, and that's run by the Addison County Sugar Makers, and it's very similar. They have a lot of the same speakers. The intent is really the same, is to get the best education and information to producers, not only technical information, but stuff about marketing and forest health.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at some of the topics, and insiders look at maple finances, tree size versus sap yield, climate change in the maple industry. What are some of the other things that maple sugar producers are really interested in knowing?
So anyone who's heard about the maple industry in the last 15 years probably knows that the industry has expanded greatly. We're producing almost 4 times as much syrup as we did 15, 20 years ago. And there's some concern now about, are we producing more than the market can bear? And so we hear from producers, operations say, we're interested in marketing. We're interested in how do we kind of expand the demand for maple syrup. And so you'll see the Maple Conference's program is really focused on learning how to do online marketing, develop content for your social media page, how to run a tight business, make sure that you're doing those things right. In addition to the regular suite of classes about how to produce most efficiently, how to maintain tree health.
Yeah, there are, I guess, 4 main sort of components to this conference.
Yeah, we tried to do tracks so that if people are really just focused on forest health, they can take 4 different classes. And we have 23 different classes to choose from. So there's everything from beginning stuff that will be interesting to beginning sugar makers, all the way up to topics that are interesting to operations that are year-round maple operation, not just a side business.
I mean, you even talk about invasive species and that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And so overall, you told me that before we started the program that there are 24 different workshops at each location that you mentioned. What are some of the production-related opportunities that you're offering?
People are curious about some of the latest technology. So reverse osmosis. What's the impact of reverse osmosis on the chemistry and flavor of syrup? Because we know that it's a huge energy savings and can really help the profitability of an operation. But there's always the question about how does it impact the finished product, and is it the same?
And how about when it comes to marketing and business?
We have a big suite of topics about that. Everything from Mark Canella, who's a farm viability specialist with UVM Extension, trying to get at the the profitability and making sure that people are running their businesses and accounting for all the costs and trying to maximize the profit based on the production of syrup. Things like how to take a good picture, how to take stuff that you can actually put on a website and make it appealing to consumers.
Interesting. Well, as you mentioned, Mark directs the Extension's Agricultural Business Program, which focuses on financial analysis and profit, as you mentioned. And so Keith Silva has more on that.
These are trees that I've been growing my whole life. They were saplings when I was a young man.
Andy Aldrich grew up on this farm in Richmond. He's built homes and he's been an innkeeper. 4 years ago, he decided it was time for a new adventure. He'd become a sugar maker.
A lot of things played into it. Gets back to how I'm put together. Some people, when they get to retirement age or when they're older, don't want to do anything. I'm not put together that way. I got to be doing something. In my lifetime, the things that I've done, I've always approached that with some forethought. So I did my due diligence that anyone should do. Created a business plan, did the research, ran the numbers, and I went, oh, it works. So I said in a few years, I can turn a profit. That really got me going.
Aldrich runs 2,600 taps over 30 acres and sells his syrup wholesale. From the construction of the sugar house to boiling the sap and everything in between, Aldrich has done it all himself. In order to keep this one-man operation running, Aldrich manages the farm as what it is, a business.
Unless you're just a backyard sugar maker, it's still a business, and you're trying to turn a profit. And you don't want to leave money on the table. You know, you can look at it purely from a business standpoint. You can go out and run a business, start a business, and your focus is like a horse with blinders on. You think you're doing everything well, but maybe there's one component that you're not doing well, so that's taking away from your efficiency and taking away from your bottom line.
While attending the annual Vermont Maple Conference, Aldrich heard about the Maple Business Benchmark Program. It's a new effort from University of Vermont Extension, focusing on farm viability in the maple industry. Maple Business Benchmark is run by UVM Extension Farm Business Management Specialist Mark Cannella.
Well, I live and breathe farm business and farm finances. That's what I do. And so I'm always looking for places to apply the farm analysis and the financial analysis to farm systems, really to improve management. We asked people, we said, would people be willing to work with us? We can offer financial analysis if you can offer the information, and let's try to have a partnership that can help people advance their own business decision making. At the same time, as an applied research project, we can use that information and find ways to do outreach to the broader population on the state of the industry or the considerations for business.
Right now is a sweet time to be a Vermont maple sugar maker. A report published in 2015 by the Vermont Maple Sugar Makers Association and the Center for Rural Studies at UVM shows the average Vermont maple sugar producer has 3,451 taps and produces 1,221 gallons of syrup. 47% of producers have increased production in the last 5 years, and Vermont's maple industry contributes between $317 and $330 million in total sales to the state's economy. This boom in maple production makes the Maple Benchmark Program essential for continued growth in the industry. Until now, sugar makers haven't had a good way to gauge their production, see how they match up with their peers, or plan for the future.
There's very little information on maple economics that are available to the public. The little that I can find is in French, and it's in metric. So it poses some challenges for the quick observation. The information hasn't been there. But maple producers are really numbers-oriented people. They count their trees, they count their taps, they count the gallons, they count their time, and so it's really fit well. This idea of saying we do financial analysis, we don't know why no one's done it before, but here we are with people that like the idea of doing it, and we've got an industry poised to maybe double in 10 to 15 years in supply to keep up with demand, so there's just a lot of good reasons to keep doing it. So we think there's something here for everyone that's willing to look at that maple operation as a business and say that profit's not a bad word, and let's see if we can manage towards it.
And here's the family farm, and it's in Chittenden County. And if it's going to stay in the family, it's got to make and carry itself. It's nice to see the old farm used.
The deep roots of this farm and this latest business are sure to establish a benchmark for other sugar makers to follow for years to come. In Richmond, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Well, here in the studio, I'm with UVM Extension Maple Specialist Mark Isselhart. You also have workshops led by experts from UVM's Proctor Maple Research Center, which is one of my favorite places to always visit. Tell me a little bit about what they'll be talking about.
Well, there are a few different talks. Tim Perkins, who's the director of the Proctor Center, is going to be covering some analysis looking at what are the environmental drivers that drive sap flow, and try to think about it in terms of climate change, see where things are going there. Abby Vandenberg, who's a research professor, is also going to be talking about some of the RO research as well.
Reverse osmosis.
Exactly.
Is the conference only for professional sugar makers?
Definitely not. We really try to make the program appealing to producers of all sizes or people who are just thinking about getting into the industry. There's always something to learn. You hear that consistently from our evaluations. So if you're at all interested in maple or have no idea of what it's all about, it's a pretty affordable thing to come and see. It's an all-day program, so it's really worth checking out.
Now, you mentioned Mother Nature. In fact, you're offering a number of workshops that deal with environmental issues. Can you give me some more examples other than the changing climate?
Sure, yeah. So we have a professor from UVM, Jen Pontius, who's going to be talking about sugar maple risk modeling, looking forward. What are some of the issues there? More closer to home, we'll have issues about forest tent caterpillar.
I know that was an issue this past couple of years.
Yep, so we've had a couple of years of defoliation, increasing defoliation. So we'll have some talks about that. And then Asian longhorn beetle, we'll have the head of the eradication program in Worcester, Massachusetts. There, tens of thousands of trees are being cut and destroyed because of this invasive insect, and it's right on the border. So producers are interested, and we want to learn more about where that's headed.
Now, the opening session at each conference site includes presentations and other key issues. What's being discussed and who's going to be presenting? So
we've heard pretty consistently from producers, people who attend these meetings, that they're concerned about the environment, climate change, but also regulation. Where are regulations headed and how are they going to impact maple producers? So we're going to have a person from Vermont who's through the FDA, who's in charge of the Food Safety Modernization Act as it relates to maple. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's actually some misinformation out there.
Yep.
So we're hoping to get producers some good concrete answers from the people who are going to be in charge of implementing that rule. Fundamentally, we're talking about a food product, so it's important that producers understand the basics of making a safe food product. And luckily, maple is considered a low-risk food, so it's not like some other things that maybe need a little bit more attention. We're also going to be hearing from one of the 12 directors of the Quebec Federation of Maple Producers, and they produce about 70% of the world's crop. So it'll be interesting to hear how they're choosing to market syrup, and perhaps something that can be learned there. And as far as the syrup itself goes, I know a big issue a couple of years back was just renaming the different grades. That's right. Yeah, so the grades have changed. It's pretty much been harmonized across all the states and provinces. And that move took a long time. It was about a 10 or 12 year process. And there's always going to be people who are, clinging to the old style of grading. The grading system has changed over the years. This is not the first change. Ideally, the change was made to inform the consumers about the unique flavor as well as the color. And the further away you get from where it's produced, the more education that's needed from the consumer perspective. And yet you hear a lot about the health benefits of maple now, and people are really kind of climbing on that bandwagon. That's true. That's true. There has been some research just investigating what compounds are in maple syrup. That work is still ongoing. I think the science is pretty well settled on the taste is good, right? And so that doesn't change. And I think as long as we can tell the story about what maple is, that it's this very unique, totally unprocessed product, a lot of that surplus syrup that's out there, I think will will find a home.
And before we go, quickly tell folks how they can sign up or get more information about the conferences.
Sure. So we've developed something called the Maple Mainline, which is essentially the program for this event. It has brief descriptions about all 23 classes, has information about registration, and you can go to the UVM Extension Maple website to click on that Mainline, and then there's some online registration tips as well.
And once again, the conference is open to anybody.
Absolutely, anybody who wants to come. It's an all-day event, some great classes, some great knowledge, and a great way to network too and hear about how other producers have tackled similar issues.
Excellent. Well, Mark, thanks a lot.
My pleasure, thanks.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.